Welcome back to Movie Moshow. Today we are going to review the Western film, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe. We post multiple times daily. Spoilers ahead. Upon entering the lonely cantina full of outlaws, Buster Scruggs, a cheery singing cowboy dressed in white, criticizes one of the patrons before shooting everyone as they reach for their weapons. As a result of the saloon's no firearms policy, Buster enters Frenchman's Gulch and leaves his guns at the door. The other players suggest that Buster play the fabled dead man's hand now that he has seen the cards in the poker game, so he enters it. However, he soon learns why the guy abruptly left. He had been handed it. A tall, threatening player named Joe stands up and pulls a concealed weapon when Buster refuses. Buster repeatedly kicks a loose plank in the poker table, tipping Joe's gun hand so that it points backwards and fires into his face after trying unsuccessfully to get Joe to stop the altercation. Joe kills himself after shooting himself 3 times. A rowdy song about Surly Joe by Buster relieves the tension in the pub, much to the joy of the customers. Disappointedly, Joe's brother shows up and challenges Buster to a street gunfight. Buster readily agrees and begins shooting off the opponent's right hand's fingers until elegantly dispatching him with the 6th shot, which is done over the shoulder while utilizing a mirror. Then, riding into town and singing, a young cowboy confronts Buster gently. Buster gladly complies, but to his shock, the young man has an even faster draw and shoots him in the forehead. Before falling, Buster looks at the wound in surprise and says on voiceover that he should have realized you can't be top dog forever. The young guy and Buster then perform a melancholy duet called When a Cowboy Trades His Spurs for Wings as Buster's spirit departs from his body and ascends to heaven while sporting angel wings and a lyre and expressing hope for a paradise above where people are better than they are on earth. Close to Agadonas, a teenage cowboy robs a remote bank in New Mexico. The babbling bank teller shoots at him as he runs, forcing him to hide under a well. He retaliates, but the teller charges him while donning a washboard and numerous pots and pans as armor, deflecting all of the cowboy's bullets while yelling, "Pan shot!" repeatedly. The teller uses the butt of his shotgun to take out the cowboy. When the cowboy comes to, he is seated on his horse beneath a tree with a noose over his neck and his hands bound. A posse's commander requests his final words after having convicted and sentenced him to death while he was still partially alive. Attacking Comanche warriors arrive during the execution and stop it in its tracks, killing the posse but leaving the cowboy still mounted. The cowboy is eventually set free by a passing drover, who then invites him along on his journey. The drover is actually a rustler, and another posse is chasing them down. The cowboy is taken into town by the posse after the drover flees, where the court summarily orders his hanging. The cowboy asks, "First time?" as he glances at the man to his left who is sobbing and lamenting his destiny as he stands on the gallows with 3 other men ready to be executed. The young woman catches the cowboy's attention and grins as the hangman swiftly hooded him and pulls the trapdoor lever amid applause. The meal ticket? Harrison, a young man with no arms or legs, and an elderly impresario travel from town to town in a wagon that can be transformed into a small stage where Harrison performs dramatic readings of well-known works like Shakespeare's Sonnet 29 and The Tempest as well as Ozymandias by Shelley and the Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln. At the conclusion of each performance, the impresario takes donations from the audience, but sales are declining as the troupe visits more isolated mountain communities with fewer and less interested crowds. The impresario watches a man gather a crowd with a chicken that purportedly performs basic arithmetic by pecking at painted numbers to answer addition and subtraction equations that the audience calls out after a performance that doesn't make any money. The impresario purchases the chicken and then maneuvers the wagon over a mountain pass before stopping by a bridge across a swiftly flowing river. Before going back to the wagon, he makes his way to the center of the bridge and drops a sizable stone to determine how deep the water is. Returning to the wheel of the wagon, the impresario only has the caged chicken as a passenger. It's all Gold Canyon. In a lush mountain valley, a weathered prospector chooses to sift through the grass for gold. When he has triangulated the most likely source, he digs a deeper hole after counting the gold particles in shovelfuls of earth. He observes an owl nursing its treetop nest after spending his first night camping. The owl's vigilant eye from a nearby tree prompts him to replace 3 of the 4 eggs he had taken for his breakfast once he climbs up and reaches the nest. On the 3rd day, he unearths gold nuggets that get bigger and bigger until he finally comes across Mr. Pocket, a significant gold vein that runs through the quartz he has exposed. The edge of the hole is being approached by a young man who has been watching him work. The prospector is shot in the back, falling to the ground on his face. The prospector stops acting dead when the young man dives into the hole to retrieve the gold, seizes his gun, and shoots him dead. The prospector examines and evaluates his streamside wound to make sure it is not fatal. He completes the gold mining, burying the young man's body in the same pit before leaving. The woman who got rattled. Alice Longabaugh and her shady businessman older brother Gilbert are traveling by wagon train to Oregon, where Gilbert says his sister will get married to a new business partner. Shortly after the trip begins, Gilbert gets a strong coughing attack and passes away. Gilbert's death is attributed to cholera, and the commanders of the wagon train, Mr. Billy Knapp and Mr. Arthur, assist Alice in burying Gilbert. Alice chooses to keep traveling rather than head back east, despite the fact that she has no certain prospects in Oregon. The young man Gilbert recruited to steer their wagon, Matt, alleges Gilbert promised him a higher than usual wage of $400, of which he expects to get half at Fort Laramie, when they will have traveled halfway. Billy listens to Alice's worry that Gilbert's money was buried with him and offers his assistance in thinking through her situation. Additionally, he helps Alice by first attempting to shoot Gilbert's tiny dog, President Pierce, named after Franklin Pierce, then scaring him away because of the dog's persistent barking, which has caused much annoyance. Through their chats, Billy develops a fondness for Alice. He offers to marry her in Fort Laramie, take over Gilbert's debt to Matt, and retire from leading wagon trains so that he and her can establish a home and family on the 640 acres in Oregon that he is entitled to under the Homestead Act. This would resolve her predicament. Billy's proposal surprises Alice, but since she's come to like him, she agrees. Mr. Arthur is informed by Billy that this will be their final voyage together. In the morning, Mr. Arthur discovers Alice is gone. When he rides over a nearby hill, he discovers her with President Pierce again, laughing as he barks at some prairie dog's antics. Then, Mr. Arthur notices an approaching war party and Native American scout. He gives Alice a gun in preparation for a fight so that, in the event that he is killed, she can shoot herself to escape imprisonment. With his rifle, Mr. Arthur successfully repels the charging warriors twice, but a third warrior briefly appears to murder him. When the warrior appears to have died, Alice actually shot herself as he had directed, he learns after killing the warrior. Uncertain of what to say to Billy Knapp, Mr. Arthur sadly follows President Pierce back to the wagon train. From the mortal remains, a stagecoach carrying an Englishman named Thigpen, an Irishman named Clarence, a Frenchman named Renee, a woman named Mrs. Betjeman, and a fur trapper travels to Fort Morgan, Colorado, at dusk. In reference to the body on the roof, Thigpen claims that he and Clarence frequently travel this route when ferrying cargo, but he does not elaborate on their line of work. The trapper rambles on about a relationship he once had with a Hunkpapa lady, in which neither of them could speak the other's language, but communication was facilitated by an understanding of one another's feelings, which led him to the conclusion that everyone has the same basic wants as the creatures he traps. Mrs. Betjeman, a devout Christian, retorts angrily that there are only two types of people, the righteous and the sinners, and she explains that she knows this because her husband, with whom she is traveling to reunite after 3 years apart, is a retired Chautauqua lecturer on moral and spiritual hygiene. Reflections on the singular and subjective nature of human experiences provide Renee with a means of challenging both her dichotomy and the trapper's oversimplification. Renee, for instance, wonders if Mr. Betjeman understands love the same way Mrs. Betjeman does, and if not, speculates that possibly he hasn't been faithful to her throughout their separation. Thank you for watching and don't forget to like and subscribe.